Let's talk about the pressure of Sunday, because no matter how great last week's message was, Sunday's always coming. And for most pastors, sermon prep kind of feels like a treadmill that you just can't get off. You start Monday by recovering. The holy hangover is what we kind of like to call it, right? At least I do. It's a real thing. Tuesday is typically full of meetings and coffees and other kinds of meetings, volunteer staff, elders, all sorts of things that are happening, right? Counseling. Well, by Wednesday, now you're scrambling and you're researching and you're Googling ideas, which leads to Thursday, which isn't much better. Actually, it's kind of worse because you're one day closer to Sunday. And then Friday, you're supposed to be off, but you're not, are you? Because you're writing, you're still in some ways ideating, and now Saturday is gone, and you apologize to your family again, right? And then now it's Sunday, and you preach. The best thing that you could come up with, you collapse, and you start all over again on Monday. This is what I think we should call the sermon survival cycle. And it is burning out so many pastors. Today on the Pressure Pod, I want to help you break that cycle and build a system that works for you. And secret works for your family and for the team that's supporting you. Okay. Here's the thing you have to realize first. You're really not burned out on preaching. You may feel that way. You're really burned out on your process. You probably don't really have a prep plan. You have this panic loop. And over time, it's costing you a lot of things. It's costing you personally creativity. It's costing probably some confidence. I bet it's costing you clarity. And your capacity to lead beyond Sunday is part of the cost. And I mentioned this a little bit already, but it's also costing the people around you. Your family is paying the price. I don't mean to say that in a harsh way. I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but it's true. Your family misses you on Friday if you're supposed to be off, and on Saturday when every other dad is off, every other mom is off. Your team is paying the price too. Now they are scrambling on their off weekend because you are scrambling. Whenever you get content to them, that's when they start doing the work to support you. And so again, not to sound harsh, but it's kind of true. You're really in this, at least panic mode, not leading the church forward if you're barely keeping up with your messages each week. So let me offer you a solution, a better way. This is the sermon system that I teach in my leadership labs and in the coaching sessions I do with pastors just like you. I also use it myself. I found myself, I led a church as a lead pastor for 13 years. A lot of you know that. I'm working with North Point Ministries, and I watched Andy Stanley and Jeff Henderson and Clay Scroggins, Joel Thomas. I was a part of that whole crew, and watching them and how they prepared for sermons helped me understand what a preparation system looks like, not just a panic cycle. And I found myself too often in that panic cycle. So I used to preach, 30, or 15, 20 times a year then. Now, I'm preaching probably 30 times a year all over the country in different churches. And this is the exact process that I even use still today, even though all of my messages are road games at this point. I'm still doing it the same way. So here's some points that you should probably think about when it comes to creating a plan. I'll give you mine, and then you can adapt it and make it yours. Here's where it starts. Number one, you have to plan way in advance, and probably way further than you ever have in the past. I like to suggest 6 to 8 weeks, and I would lean towards the 8 weeks in advance. Now, you don't have to write 8 weeks worth of sermons in advance, okay? So just hold on. But I do think 8 weeks out, we should always be able to name the big idea, the key passage, and the topic that we are going to address each week. Now, the closer we get to each week, I'll talk about this more in a minute, the more of that message is prepared and done. However, 8 weeks out, you should know the topic. You should know the key passage. You should begin to exegete some of that, obviously. And then what's the big idea for the series and then for each individual week? This also gives your team time to collaborate with each other and with you to design and to prepare around the messages that you're developing. I'm looking at my calendar. I looked at it before I began recording this, and I have lots of sermons coming up over the next couple of months. I'm delivering several, obviously, in the next 8 weeks. I've already ideated all of them. I've researched most of them, and a few of them already have drafts written. So Working on more than one message at a time, that might sound a little confusing. It is a learned skill, but I think it is too important to create margin to allow that to be an excuse not to do it. I've learned through experience that working on more than one message at a time actually helps my messages become stronger. I think there's something powerful that happens in that marinating process, but it doesn't just affect the single sermon you marinate on. It's actually affecting all the things that you're working on. And that's a positive. That's a positive for your messages. So working on several ideas at once, I think it creates an interesting mental space that, at least for me, and I bet for you too, it opens my mind to new perspectives and new ideas. So that's the first thing. You got to get 6 to 8 weeks out, at least on topics, big ideas, passages. Now, number two, I think it's super helpful to break your week into phases. Let me kind of give you a Monday through Thursday and, what we do on Friday and Saturday. So Monday, I think Mondays are really great for ideation. Maybe this is the day that you spend some time, and this way you're not trying to block 8 hours a day, to work on a bunch of things. You can block 2 hours on Monday, and maybe you revisit the ideas that are 6 to 8 weeks out. Revisit those key passages that you're planning to preach in the coming weeks. Again, revisit is the key word because we're 6 to 8 weeks out. We have time if we want to make adjustments. So look at how things have gone. Is there anything new that God has placed on your heart? Where are things at in your church? Does the plan that you currently have still fit? That's a great use of Monday. Tuesday, what do you do on Tuesday? Study. Tuesday is the day that I like to dive into the text, gather resources. Now, not for this Sunday. All right, you've already done that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for future Sundays. So if I'm 8 weeks out on Tuesday, I'm really beginning to study stuff that's anywhere from 4, 5, 6 weeks out. I'm beginning to exegete passages, really dig deep into how things work together. I'm beginning to even think through some of the application that I may want to drive home in each message. I believe every message needs application, so I'm beginning to work on some of that. That's Tuesday. It's a study day for things, though, that are not this week. We're still talking 4, 5, 6 weeks out. Wednesday is the day I like to draft content. I like to get all the things that are in my head out on paper, digital paper. Now, this is a draft. This is a big deal. Don't worry about the quality yet. Every great message begins with a horrible first draft. I have a good friend who's an author who taught me that. She used more colorful language to describe it. But this is true of everything that's written, every great book, movie, story. They all start from bad first drafts. And over time, the message kind of, as we talked about, it marinates. It begins to form over time. The Holy Spirit is so interesting to me in how that works around content and messages. I believe the Holy Spirit can really work on Saturday night specials. However, I have found that the more time I give the Spirit to work, the better I am able to hear the Spirit. So this isn't about, can the Spirit do it on Saturday? Of course the Spirit can work on Saturday. But am I in a position to hear the Spirit on Saturday? Well, probably not if I'm trying to create a Saturday night special for tomorrow's message. So when I'm 4 weeks out, 5 weeks out, drafting content, it gives me space to really think, to listen. I'm amazed at how many different stories come to mind or things I experience just in the day-to-day that affect the message I'm going to deliver in 4 or 5 weeks because I'm thinking about it. Now, Thursday, what do we do on Thursday? Well, here's where we finish up what we're doing on Sunday. Now, I think we should do it on Thursday morning. Maybe for you, it is even a Wednesday afternoon thing, and we free up Thursday. You can do that if you want. But the reason is I don't want to finish on Friday and then ask my production team, whether they're staff or volunteers, to work on Saturday when they should be off with their family. And you know the phrase, right? An emergency on your part, or lack of planning on your part creates an emergency on their part. And I just don't want to be that person. I just think that's bad leadership. And so Thursday morning, I want before noon to have the message for this weekend completely finished. Again, I would prefer that to be done on Wednesday. Now, I've already drafted it several weeks ago, so it isn't, there's no reason I can't finish it early. In fact, lots of times I have the message finalized 3 weeks in advance. Now, I might make a few edits as I am internalizing the message on a Thursday. Internalization is the process of memorizing the flow, not the message, but memorizing the story and the journey that you have built for your message on Sunday. So internalizing is when we're rehearsing and really allowing the burden to sink deep in our heart. Great communicators don't memorize the message, they understand the message. This is what we do, is we internalize. But we should try to do that on Thursday. I have lots of pastors that I work with and friends that I have worked with in the past that will even bring their production team into the sanctuary auditorium on Thursday and sometimes record it live. And if it's great, they'll use it maybe for their online broadcast. Or even if it's nothing other than a practice run, everybody gets to practice. The person running your CGs gets to practice. Audio is practiced. You get to practice. And practicing at home once or twice is fine. It's nothing like being on the stage. Now, granted, having nobody in the room definitely changes the message, right? I feel like even in time, a message that I do for an empty room is probably going to be about 10 or 15% short on time than in the live room. You know how that works. You get in the live room, you just come alive in a different way. It takes longer. But when you do it on Thursday, everybody is so much more prepared. You know what that means? It means Friday and Saturday become rest and just some light review. Wouldn't that be great for you and for your team? For you to walk in on Sunday fully prepared and fully refreshed because you have rested on Friday and you have rested most of Saturday. Before I understood kind of this process, before I developed this for myself, listen, my family would tell you Saturdays were not great. And we had little kids at the time, and we had soccer games and football and cheerleading. All the things. Go to the pool with the kids in the neighborhood. I would try to play tennis. That was my favorite thing to do on the weekends, but I really didn't get to do it very much with all those little kids. But about 2:00 p.m. every Saturday, my wife would look at me, and she would know. About 2:00. I don't know why, but for me, 2:00, I would just hit a moment where I was in a zone, and it was Sunday preaching zone. And my mental space was 100% dedicated to content, the message, and Sunday. Now, with more reps and more practice, certainly that has changed. But the things that changed it the most were preparation. This kind of system is what really fixed that. I recently traveled to New York to pick up my daughter, my 17-year-old. She was doing a fashion thing in New York. Really cool that she got to do that. And I had to go pick her up. Well, got to go pick her up. Let me say it that way. I went up there Friday, flew back with her Saturday. I was talking to my wife when we got home that evening, and I told her, a few years ago, there is no way in the world I could have done that. I would have been so stressed out on Friday and Saturday, not being at home, preparing and still writing and thinking. But because I was so far in advance, I was able to do that, sleep really well Saturday night, show up Sunday morning at Southside Church, about an hour away, drove down, and I think we delivered an incredible piece of content, full of the Gospels on parenting, really helpful, and I felt great the whole time. Now, I don't know. I'm not trying to say it was like the greatest message ever. I think it was pretty great, but I will tell you, because I was so far ahead, it didn't stress me out on the weekend. See, this is the kind of rhythm that builds momentum, and it gives each day a real clear focus. All right, let me keep going. Number 3, use a framework. I'm going to talk a lot about this in an upcoming leadership lab. If you want to join us, you should. You just go to the website, gavinadams.com. You'll see these pressure valve sessions, and I'm going to do a leadership lab on this. The pressure valve session is completely free. So it's an hour. We're going to unpack this more. But I always kind of recommend Andy Stanley's model and the North Point kind of model for communication. I worked as a location lead pastor there for a long time, and I was on the leadership team for 13 years as well. Andy, no matter what you think about Andy, okay, he is a generational communicator. And his approach to communication, and this is important, it's art and science. I want you to understand the science. You need to bring your art to it. But the science really functions around how the brain works. That's science. We don't want to violate that. So the messages that I learned from Andy, the approach we learned was 5 elements: connection, tension, truth, application, landing. If you read the book Communication for Change, you may have heard those phrases, or maybe you heard it, me, we, God, you, we. The idea being that we want to string these 5 elements together to create a story. That's what these things do. It makes your messages sticky and memorable. And this is so cool. It helps you and it helps the people in your church. I mean, internalizing a story arc as a message is so much easier than memorizing 3 points in a poem, okay? And all the stuff that goes around it. And it gives you a repeatable structure that still allows for lots of creativity. So don't feel like this is hampering anything. It's actually unleashing everything that you want unleashed on Sunday. Memorable, sticky application that's easy for you to internalize and remember, and easy for your church to do something with. Because again, application is the point, which is number 4. Prioritize application. From the beginning of your research, you should start asking the question, what do I want people to do with this? Okay, information. This is such a big deal for me. Information is not the finish line. Application leads to information. I like to say it this way when I teach courses on this. We teach information to inspire application that God uses for transformation. Let me say that one more time. We teach information to inspire application because that's what God uses for transformation. Okay, last thing, number 5, as a part of this process, you really need to reflect after you preach. Experience, and I've talked about this before in the pressure pot already, but experience isn't the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. If you want to grow as a preacher or a communicator, whatever you're doing, you have to evaluate your preaching, your communication. So how do you do that? Well, lots of ways, but here's a very simple thing to consider. What if just every Monday morning you spent 15 minutes asking yourself and others, if you're really brave, what worked, what didn't, what would I do differently? Now, I would also suggest you watch the message again and then ask those questions. You can't just walk off the stage after 2 or 3 services and then Monday morning go in with the holy hangover and go, well, did that work? It's hard to tell from the stage. You can, but it's harder. You should watch yourself. That's brutal, but you will learn so much more by doing that. And as I mentioned, invite others into the feedback loop. When I consider the growth that I have experienced as a communicator over the last 20 years, having reps helped, but it was the evaluation of those reps that helped the most, 10 times more than just doing it. So here's kind of maybe my challenge for you this week. Take 30 to 60 minutes this week and just map out your next 8 Sundays if you haven't done that. Okay, again, don't write them, just the big ideas, the big themes, the key passage if you know it. Then build out a sermon rhythm week by week. Because here's the deal, right? You really don't need more time. You just need a better system. And when your process is working for you, not against you, you'll feel the pressure lift. So if you want help building a system like we talked about, again, I do a leadership lab on this. This is like a masterclass cohort experience. I also have a pressure valve session that's coming up soon as I record this. This is going to be released in July, late July. I have in mid-August a pressure valve session on preaching. I'd love for you to be a part of that if you'd like to. It's completely free, okay? No fluff either. I'm just going to unpack how do we create memorable and sticky messages. So I'd love for you to consider being a part of that because your messages matter. And I'd love for you to bring the joy back to your preaching.